Hi guys, I hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about the transformation, the miraculous growth of this pretty marble queen. Few months back I got these cuttings of marble queen and I let them sit into water. This video was shot I think after a week because by this time these brown aerial nodes they started developing roots into water. So what I did, I let it sit into water and eventually I divided the cutting. Like I took a small section off and I let it grow into water. But the other end, I planted it into soil. Now I also want to take the opportunity to share that if you let your cuttings sit into water, they actually don't get very healthy, or even the growth is pretty slow, because obviously the nutrient content that the plants are getting, it is pretty less as compared to what they get in the soil. So yeah, I planted it into the soil and this is what happened. You see, this is my marble queen now, and the growth has been amazing. It is it grows slowly as compared to the other pothos, but I seriously want to share that how many nodes this plant produced. It took time, I'll be very honest. Cuttings, they need some time. They need the transition period of shifting from water to soil is pretty stressful for the plant, because previously it was exposed to a lot of moisture, water was plenty. But once it moves to soil, obviously the plant goes into some sort of stress, and the growth isn't, it doesn't just start growing as quickly. But the cuttings, they settled, they took time, but once it started growing, it ended up producing so many new shoots. Like every node ended up producing a new branch, and you see how stunning, how healthy, how full this plant is. And let me tell you what I said previously, that I divided the cutting. I let one section grow into water and the other I planted into the soil. So this is the section that I planted into the soil. um so yeah, I was saying that it produced so many new branches. I fertilized it mildly time to time. I either give a solution of seaweed, or I sprinkle just a teeny amount, like very tiny amount, very light dosage of NPK, and you see these tiny new leaves and shoots which are popping out. So the plant has been doing great. Now once it grows a little bigger, now obviously then I can, trim it more so that it produces more branches, and I can use the cuttings to obviously have more marble queen plants. Now, one thing that I wanted to share, that when this cutting was planted into the soil, the older leaves. You see this leaf, the one which is kind of droopy and it's hanging. Now, this was one of the OG leaves which was there on the main cutting, and even though the plant started growing and doing very well, this cutting this not cutting, but this leaf, it continued staying limp, even this one. So these two are the older leaves that were there when I first got the cutting, and they literally like never healed. They remained as it is. Now eventually, once they grow old and they're gonna shed off, but I wanted to share that these were the leaves which were first planted into, were kept into water, and they could, they maybe couldn't adapt. Otherwise, the other leaves, if you see, they are pretty crisp. Another thing that I wanted to share, that this container, this is an old container from some cup noodle, and I try to use these containers as much as I can, because I try to use whatever plastic containers that I have at hand, and I use them in planters. They work well. All I do is I puncture some holes, and the planter is ready. Now, the cutting that I mentioned, that I let it grow into water, now a few days back, I finally decided to move it into soil, because you see that this cutting barely grew. What it did was that it produced maybe one leaf, and the older leaf kept on, it kept on dying. So the growth has been very sad and limpy. You see that one of the leaf is dying and hanging, and even there is barely any brightness or variegation in this cutting. So this was just to compare that how well a plant grows in water as compared to soil. In soil, obviously the cuttings, they get more nutrition. They do pretty well, they can be fertilized, whereas in water, the growth is pretty stunted and it's very very slow. So definitely, once we develop the roots in water initially, it's always better to transfer the cuttings into soil. I'm just removing these old cuttings which are yellow, because I don't want the plant to invest its energy into these leaves because they are already dead. Here you see that I've used another container, so they fit very well into the ceramic planters that I get. And I try to, since I have lots of pothos, I try to use these containers as much as I can to add more green spots to my house, and they make wonderful gifts, which I eventually gift to my friends and family. So yeah, I plant a lot of cuttings. I try to upcycle all these plastic containers that I have at home. And yeah, the live demonstration of the fact that how a cutting can react, the cutting from the same plant when it's planted into soil as compared to water. Here is another container that I upcycled as a planter, and I used it for planting my cuttings. So you see that 6 months I gave, to these cuttings. I planted one set into soil and another into water, and the cutting that was growing into water barely grew in the past 6 months. I hope you like the video. Until next time, bye bye.